Welcome back to Your 1230, the only podcast where our guests tell their story with the help of 12 questions in just 30 minutes. Today, we are very thrilled to be speaking with Edward Miskie. Edward is the sole survivor of a rare cancer. This year is his 10th year cancer survivorship anniversary, an anniversary he didn't think he was going to get. So he's celebrating with his book, Cancer, Musical Theater, and Other Chronic Illnesses. Among other things, Edward is an actor, a singer, songwriter, writer, and producer. Edward, welcome. We are really happy to be speaking with you.
Thank you so much. Hearing that back is so funny because it's like, how many other things can there possibly be that you do?
Well, that's my first question. When you meet somebody new on the street, what do you tell them that you do?
I literally was yelling at myself about this the other day. I went to introduce myself to someone. They're like, what do you do? And my initial response is always like, I mean, like, what don't I do? Like, what do you want to know? But I'm trying to get better at being like, I'm an author and a creator.
Okay.
Because that kind of sums up the whole jig, right?
I think it touches everything, so that works. But kind of with the author and creating piece, the book, how did that come about?
Yeah, so I had cancer. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens that you don't ever see in TV or film or any other kind of medium that kind of showcases the cancer experience that happened that I wasn't ready for and no one warned me about. And I didn't really think that they were actually happening. I was gaslighting myself because I was like, this can't be real. I'm not like you're just sad and going crazy is basically the narrative that I was telling myself, until I started meeting other people who were around my age who also had cancer. And this was by sheer accident. This was not me like, I need a support group. This was like, like the PG-13 version of it is that I like went and met this guy and like we like had a little thing, and then afterwards like he mentioned that he was coming from this particular part of town, and I was like, oh, that's where my hospital is, and he
Get out of
like
here.
shut down and was like, and I was like, wait, stop, hang on. And so we had a really great conversation about cancer. We're still friends today. And he's the reason I wrote this book, because he was talking a lot about the same things that I was thinking and doing and having a really hard time with. And I was like, oh, well, here's the book. Just found it. Just fucked the book out. So that's what's going to happen. But it was a really great moment. Like we again still are friends and talked about just like, the aftermath of being told that you're cancer free. Cancer, the treatment itself is garbage, but then like you get out and it's not the parade and celebration and that you think it is.
So at the time of that conversation, were you still in treatment? Were you cancer free? Where were you when you met him?
Yeah, so at that point I was about 3 years cancer free,
Okay.
and I was still kind of like banging my head against a wall, like, what is happening in my life? And I think a lot of that was because I had defaulted back to what I was used to doing, like going to auditions and like getting drunk with friends and like just being silly and stupid and artsy and whatever else I was doing in my life at the time. And then he kind of derailed that, because he kind of came along and said, like, I feel lost. I don't know what's going on. I'm not motivated to get up in the morning. I hate everything everyone is saying to me all the time. And it just was like this. Oh yeah, that's how I felt for the last 30 years. Because you just change. You change as a person, and it's not something that you really expect. Like, of course, something that catastrophic is going to change you, but the preparedness for it is lacking.
Yeah, I mean, even as you say that, I think most people have very little understanding and certainly no, unless you've even had a close friend, a family member go through a situation like this, you still only have secondhand. So I'm going to ask you questions as comfortable as you are answering. I want to start here, and when you have the word soul and rare in your cancer summary, not good. The survivor in between is fantastic, so that's great. But if you could take us when you found out that not only you found out you had a rare cancer, but that ultimately that the chance of survivorship was not very high, and that now you are the sole survivor. What was that like?
Well, those three things happened at three very different points, right? So like we found out I had cancer. We knew it was kind of an off the wall brand of cancer, if you will. And that was kind of shocking, but we trusted the medical team, and we were like, okay, well, they've dealt with stuff like this before, they know what they're doing, cool, fine. And then, like, maybe 3 rounds of chemo in, it became evident that they didn't know what they were doing, and they were shooting in the dark, and I requested that I sit down with my oncologist to be like, "Am I a dead man walking? Like, what's happening?" And she basically just flat out, and I said, "Please be honest with me, I do not need bullshit right now, like, I just need you to tell me straight up, do I need to start, like, planning a funeral?" And in so many words, she kinda said, "Maybe." And that's my interpretation of it. She was not that forthcoming with that information. That was just my interpretation. But she kind of said, like, yeah, we're having a really hard time getting rid of this. It's not happening as quickly or as easily as we had anticipated. There's lots of different types of lymphoma, of course, but like this particular type, which is called rare and large B cell Burkitt's, like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, it takes up a whole page. It is not easy. I didn't fit the demographic. I didn't fit the prototype for it. Prototype is probably the wrong word, but I fit nothing that had to do with this cancer. So getting rid of it was like, what do we do? So that's how I found that out, that it was rare. Like, I didn't fit any of the things. And so moving on, we didn't know what to do. And eventually I ended up switching hospitals. And then my oncologist at that second hospital, once I hit the 5-year cancer-free mark, she kind of told me, you're the only person who's ever lived this long without a recurrence or not dying. And I was like, I I I didn't need to hear that. I didn't need to know that part.
How come? Why didn't you need to know that part? Why didn't
Well,
you say
I
that as
mean,
positive news?
it is positive news in the sense that, like, I'm alive and I didn't have to have the funeral I planned, but it was very much like, well, not wanting to put anything out in the universe and like knock wood and all the things, but should something happen and I be put in that position again, I'm the protocol. I'm the baseline for this case. And unless something ridiculous has happened after me, which I'm not keeping up to speed with, maybe I should be, um, I'm it. And so what do you do with that? Like, it's kind of like, cool, there's one unicorn left and we don't know how to fix it.
Okay. All right. So thank you for kind of walking us through that because as it is one line in the bio, it certainly was a long period of time and it was at different levels that each of those things became apparent or understandable. So that's very helpful. I mean, obviously it's the case, but thank you for walking us through that.
Sure.
You mentioned that you were not searching for support groups or anything of that nature. Do you talk to patients? Have you found it cathartic to speak to somebody who is traveling down a path that you went down? Have you thought about anything like that, or do you do anything like that?
Not in the capacity in which you're talking about. I think my version of that is doing just this. Like, I wrote the book to have this conversation, and I am seeking out mediums in which to talk about it more, uh, to have this conversation. Like, support groups in my experience are very like, let's sit around and cry and talk about our feelings. And I want solutions. I want to solve the problem. I don't want to talk about it more than I need to. Like, okay, cool. Like, let's go. I figured out why I feel this way. Let's fix it. And I did not find that support groups functioned that way. So for me, like, meeting people one on one, when I started writing the book, I reached out to people I knew who were within my age bracket and kind of like talked to them about their experience and drew from that. And it just wasn't my thing, but this is my version of doing that in my way, of having this book and talking about, like, all the things that kind of blindside you, that you're like, well, this isn't in, this movie that talks about cancer.
Well, you mentioned movie, and that's where besides again, secondhand tales, that's where my baseline for understanding what that diagnosis is like is that scene in the room where it's like you have cancer and everything else, you don't understand, you don't hear. It's like they fast forward 2 months into treatment because it's like you're just so blindsided by it. But you just describe it in a much more thoughtful way that first I want to say surprised, but uh, wholeheartedly into the uh, belief of that your doctor is going to take great care of you, and unfortunately, that was not the case. And you would think that sometimes you would want to be skeptical, or your first instinct would be to say no way, or this isn't happening to me. But you walk us through the what that period looked like and how you had the uh, unexpected good outcome. But I'm rambling here, so I want to go back to the book. So the title, Cancer, Musical Theater, and other chronic illnesses. How did you end up on that title?
I cannot take credit for any of it.
Okay. Okay. So who deserves the credit there?
My friend Alex Perlman, he's one of my oldest friends in the city. God love him. He is one of my favorite humans. And I was telling him about this book, and he's a brilliant man, and he will never say that out loud or take credit for that kind of accolade, but he is. And he just said the title, and I was like, that's funny. And I didn't want the book to be serious. I didn't want it to be a dirge. And so the title just made sense. And there was never another title. It was only ever that. And so that it was not me. It was Alex 100%, and I will never take credit for that.
Okay. Well, you're also humble, so we'll add that to the list here of adjectives.
Well.
Well, okay. Well, to
Maybe.
be determined on that front. Um, who should read this book?
Anyone who's had any kind of proximity to cancer. And I don't mean that like, oh, my second cousin who lives 7,000 miles away had cancer. Like, that's not what I mean. I mean, like, you, or if a family member or close friend or loved one has had it, and or you've lost them to it, or they are currently going through it. um in the feedback I have gotten specifically from medical professionals, that has changed their perspective on cancer care and bedside manner, and what the experience as a human is. Because, I talk about it in the book, and I talk about it in these conversations as well. You become a patient. You're not a person, you're a patient. And the people who are taking care of you forget that, like, you know, you need to eat, and you want to have sex, and you have relationships, and a number of other things. Like, sometimes, some days you just can't take a shit, and that sounds fine on paper, but like, it feels terrible. I went, like, I think 6 or 7 days without going to the bathroom once. There's a whole chapter on it. It's thrilling. And it's just like the little things, like, I had a boyfriend during this time, and then I didn't, because they left. And then, like, my best friend, like, I thought was going to be there for me, and then wasn't, because they decided that they couldn't be around. Like, little things like that happen that you're not prepared for. And I don't even know if nurses or doctors know that that happens. And if they do, they're not going to offer it to you to, like, warn you, because, like, then you're skeptical of everyone around you, and you're like, wait a minute.
I was warned
are
about this.
are you leaving me? I was warned about you. Um, but yeah, it's just like this minefield. Every step of the way is a minefield. And so, the good side of that is that you really do find out who your friends are, and who the people that are going to be there for you are. And that's probably the best part about having cancer, is that there's no question. Like, I know exactly who's going to be there for me.
It is a silver lining, as unfortunately to find out in that manner, but you do know who those people are. Uh, the bedside manner and the feedback from the doctors, that's again surprising and it's wonderful that they are having that perspective, and it can't be overstated how difficult it must be to be in that position. And then even doctor who and medical staff who have proximity to yourself as a patient, obviously they can't understand this. Like, so to read it must be very powerful for them. Have you had any feedback from any other cancer survivors?
Yeah, the people first, I mean, first and foremost, frontline, like, the people that I talked to and kind of consulted with when I decided to do this, like, most of them were like, nail on the head, buddy. Like, they get it. You can read between the lines, and it's very nuanced, but and in some places it's not very nuanced. But it very much is the real and raw, and I hate to use that terminology because it sounds so trite, but it's the real and raw experience of it. It's not the, like, wake up in a hospital room bald and like, oh, my life is falling apart. It's a slow burn for that to happen. The way that your body changes, the way that you change, the way that your brain changes. Like, chemo brain is such a wild concept. Like, It's a thing that happens. Like, I'm sure you've heard like wet brain with people who are alcoholics that go to like rehab and whatnot. It's kind of similar. Like, your brain just is like, "Dur, dur, dur," and there's nothing you can do about it because that's just the treatment that you're under. And I was a hard ass. I was really hard to deal with as a patient. Because I wasn't happy, and I wanted to just be around people and things that made me happy, and doctors were not it. So, yeah, they get the brunt of it, and it's not easy being a doctor or anyone in the medical profession, and I would never take that away from them. It's so difficult, especially in a field like oncology where like death is part of your day, and I would never pretend to understand that.
So this will be an unfair question, kind of as a follow up there. With your experience with these doctors, medical professionals, why do you think you obviously have to be excellent in what you do to go into an oncology field and an oncology role? Why do you think these doctors made that choice ultimately when you describe such a difficult place to work? If you had to guess,
I don't need to guess. I asked.
okay,
Not my oncologist, but my oncology nurse in the first hospital I was in. She was this elderly Jamaican lady, and just one of the nicest people I've ever met. Just nurses are salt of the earth, man. Like, holy
absolutely.
shit. And she came in one night, and a little incident happened that is in the book that I'll save for the pages. But she walked in on me, let's say, and we started having a conversation about why she does this. It was like, I think my 4th day in the hospital, maybe. And I was like, "Why do you do this?" And she told me, and this shook me to the core and still to this day does, that nursing was never on her radar. She never wanted to do it. She was a wife and a mother, and her husband got cancer, and she tried to save his life by taking care of him at home and couldn't. And so she became a nurse to as almost like a penance to try and make up for that fact. And like that just I'm like in a hospital room, like hooked up to chemo poles and like just having like chemicals dripping through my body. And so I'm like weeping on her arm while she's changing my my fucking IV shit. And I mean, I wish I could find her again and just like give her the biggest hug because she was such a star in that incident and in that those circumstances for me. And like just that anecdote was like, oh Jesus Christ. And, like, just thinking, like, that's how she walks around every day, thinking, like, "Couldn't save you, but I'm gonna make it up to you." Like, good lord.
That's an incredible story, and at least gives some, I don't say rationale, but some understanding of why somebody would be in that day after day, a
Yeah.
difficult position. And good for you for asking. And
I
please,
wish I would have asked my oncologist because I mean, she's such a star too, like, I was terrified of her. She's 4'11" and she wears, like, 6-inch heels and mini skirts, and, like, what a star. Loved her, but was horrified of her all the time. And that was at the second hospital, and when I went there and had her, like, reassess because I was going for a second opinion, um, I kind of just said to her she gave me some really horrendous news. I was misdiagnosed and there was all this other shit that was going on, and I just was like, "How do you deal with this? Like, this is impossible to deal with. How do you deal with it?" And it's probably not the best answer, but she said, "I just put every little patient in a box and I file them away and I deal with them later." And I was like, "Okay, well, like, you're super busy, so when do you get to deal with them?" And she just kind of was like, "I don't."
I'll agree with you. Not the best answer there.
Yeah,
So,
no, but I mean, like, you do what you need to. Like, you're working 24 hours a day. Like, she's always on
yeah.
call. Like, she's head of the department. She's world renowned. Like, you don't get a break. And so, probably that might be the best way for her to kind of deal with that.
Okay. My last question on the book. You mentioned interviewing and reaching out to others. How did you decide whom to speak with and who are they?
So I started this because I would love to do a book tour. I do not have the time or the funds to have a book tour. So this is kind of my digital book tour, and I've
I
been
see.
specifically looking for people who talk about like life transformations or like things that happen to people that are being highlighted or spotlighted or something in that sense. Anything that has to do with human stories or the human experience or anything along those lines and or adjacent to it. um again, I wrote this book to kind of have the conversation that isn't had, that you only really know if you're going through it. And at that point, like, wish I would have known before I knew. So, it's, I just want people to know before they find out for themselves.
Good answer. Okay. And I know I said last question, but I'm going to build off of the musical theater in the title of the book. What is your musical theater experience?
It's the only experience. I have been performing and on stages and singing since I was like 4 years old. Much to my parents' annoyance, I'm sure. But I mean, I grew up with Broadway, I grew up with pop music. My dad's a musician, my mom's a musician, my older sister is a professional singer, my little sister sings. It runs in the family. I think my great grandfather started the first American-based tamburitzin band like ever anywhere. So it runs in the family. And I ran away to New York when I was 18, right after high school, and started a career in musicals. And so I've done that for the last, 18 years.
Okay. When you got to New York at 18, where did you live?
I lived in East Harlem. I loved it.
Okay. Where were you coming from?
Pennsylvania.
Okay. And how did you find an apartment in East Harlem?
I spent wasted 6 months of this poor realtor's life looking for an apartment. Um and finally found one. He hated me. Oscar. His name was Oscar. I will never forget him.
Okay. I would love his side of that story. Where did you
Yeah,
live?
he,
Where did
he
you live for
probably wanted to
those?
kill me.
Where did you live for those 6 months?
I mean, I was still in high school.
So
I
you would come
started,
back and forth from Pennsylvania looking for. Okay, so you knew this wasn't kind of I'm done. I'm going tomorrow. You had a plan.
yeah, this had, I bullied my parents into allowing me to do this. And it basically was kind of understood that like, you can help me and let me do this, or I will do it without you. But one way or another, I'm leaving here. And it fucked up our relationship for a while. But and I'm sure I'm literally writing a second book right now, and third book maybe, as of like yesterday. And one of the things that I was writing about is like my parents' perspective of that. Like they didn't help me move. I used my mom's car. I drove up here. I met a guy that I had met on the internet to like help me move in. That could have been me being murdered. Like who knows?
Doesn't
And
usually end well.
yeah, I made some bad decisions as a teenager in
All
moving to New
18-year-olds
York.
do, so that's
Right.
okay.
Totally. Like, yeah, moving to New York alone as a teenager wasn't the brightest idea, but I did it. And I lived. The city's been trying to kill me for almost 20 years. So, just the perspective of like how scared they must have been, you know, and like they had time to think about it. I decided in December of 2004 and January 2005, I was like, great, I'm going to drive to the city because I can do that. And I'm going to start looking at apartments. And I found a realtor online, and I dragged his ass and he dragged mine all over. I looked at apartments in the East Village, the West Village, Upper East Side. It was crazy.
What was the first show that you landed?
Oh God. It was I did some of these like janky ass cabaret things at Don't Tell Mamas in Midtown in New York, but then I ended up like leaving town on like my first like contract to do a show, doing Miracle on 34th Street at this theater in the ass crack of Ohio. Just dinner theater. It was a whole mess.
Okay. I was not expecting that to be the answer. I expected off Broadway, but I didn't expect you in Ohio. So okay.
One should be so lucky to be off Broadway. Ohio is where most people who move here to do theater end up.
Under, understood. Do you prefer the acting or the singing part of musicals?
Well, I mean, they're kind of one and the same. You can't really do one without the other. So whether you like one or prefer one to the other, you don't have a choice but to do both.
Okay. I feel like I should challenge you on that you can act without singing, but since we're in the musical realm, I'm going to let that pass.
I mean, if you're in a musical,
Yes,
yes,
sure.
but you cannot complete the show by only doing one of them.
Okay. So help me here then. Are musical actors, are they musicians who are acting or are they actors who sing?
It really depends on the person. There is no monolith there. Like some people are actors who sing, and sometimes you can tell who they are, and sometimes you can't. And then there are singers who act, and sometimes you can tell who they are, and sometimes you can't. It depends on the show, on the director, on the skill set. It's no one is just one thing, right?
That's a fair answer. Okay, I'll take that. Uh, so you've written a book, you have acting, singing, and writing and producing as part of your credits. At this stage of your career, do you prefer to be still on stage, or do you look forward to the off the stage aspect of entertainment?
I'm sure, not to your surprise, there's a story that goes with this. Um, I had kind of given up. Well, not given up. I just wanted to redirect. I wanted to be left alone. I didn't like feel sparkly about it anymore. And then, and I apologize to anyone who's hearing this again, but April of last year, my best friend from high school came to see me in the city, and we went to go see Chicago with Pamela Anderson. And she was great. I was like beside myself with how good she was. But sitting there, I was watching the dude who plays the Richard Gere role, Billy Flynn, and I was like, I'm coming for your job. I want to do that role. And about a week later, the national tour like thing, the audition went up for it, and I hadn't auditioned for anything in like 2 years, and I was like, well, I'll send in for it anyway. Who cares? And I got it,
Wow.
and I booked it. And so I was in rehearsal for this, and we were doing a pre-performance run of the tour, and I was replaced at the last minute and kind of wasn't given a reason why. And it was very poorly handled by production and management. And it's water under the bridge now. Who cares? I went to Europe for 3 weeks and like raged in Paris. It was great. And that kind of like ripped the rug out from under me. And I kind of was already coming from a place where I was done with it. And then that really kind of like welded the lid shut. So I, compose and produce like more pop centered music on my own for fun at home. And that's kind of like one of my creative outlets, like I bought all this equipment during the pandemic. You're looking at some of it for music stuff. And I was like, great, well, I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm going to write and produce my own shit. And if someone wants me to do some stuff for them, cool. But, you know, that's how that kind of ended. I think one day I'll go back to it. I just need a minute to step away because the industry's going through some shit right now. The union's going through some shit right now. And I just can't be asked. I have other things I want to do.
That's with that story. That's very understandable, and I would I would not blame you for keeping that as your point of view for quite a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the good part of it is the guy who replaced me is a good friend of mine, and like we're cool, and we talked about it, and it's fine. He's the one that warned me, and so there's a lot. I won't go into it, but we're
Okay,
good. It's all
all
good.
right. Moving on.
Yes.
So, if you have a typical day currently, what does that look like?
Oh my God, a typical day. um, I this year I started doing the whole like getting up at like 5, 6 in the morning thing, like for no fucking reason, just because I was like, I want to. Like it was just a thing that had been on my radar. Like, who are these creatures that get up at 5 in the morning on purpose? Like, what's wrong with you? And I started doing it, and I totally get it. Like, I'm wrecked by the end of the day, but like you get so much done, and you're bending time by doing this. Your day's like 72 hours long, and you can have like 3 or 4 different versions of a day within one. So yeah, I get up at 5. I've started going to the gym at like 6, 7 in the morning, which also is like, who is this person? Who are these creatures that are going to the gym at this hour? And I'm now one of them. And yeah, I mean, I come home, I do some work. I'm about to drop a podcast of my own with one of my producing partners. I'm turning the book into a TV show, so I'm working on the pilot, and it's going to be a musical as well. So like that's, I'm working on those components. And I have my regular day job. I work in sales, and do calls all day long, and then like between calls I do other things, and then like I do some writing, and just kind of tried to bend as much time as I can.
Okay, now that makes sense. And as you are getting the show ready for, I think you said pilot, do you have an idea who's going to play you? Are you going to play yourself, or who would be that ideal actor for you?
I have been so struggling with this because in the book I'm 25, and like clearly the face and body are not 25 anymore. And like I
Not
very
clear to me.
specifically,
Not clear
well,
to me.
that's very sweet of you, but you're lying. Um, it's the ring light. It's helping. um, and so I have this weird block in my head that I can't play me because I'm supposed to be young. But it like the age of the story, it doesn't the story doesn't change with any kind of age whatsoever. But I do have a person that I've worked with that I'm supposed to be meeting up with this week to kind of drop that bomb on him as like a possibility. And if not, I have a secondary idea for him. He looks a little bit like me when I was that age. He's younger than I am. Um, Significantly younger than I am. Like I think he's probably like 27. Doesn't matter. But he's maybe gonna be the person that maybe plays me. We'll see. I don't know.
There
Haven't
we
gotten
go.
there yet.
Okay. Somehow we are coming up on time already. We have covered a lot of
So
ground,
much.
so much ground. Is there anything I didn't ask you that I probably should have, Edward?
I mean, that's up to you. This is your universe. I'm just a guest in it.
It's the first time I've got that answer for that question, so I'll take it. Um, I guess this is my last follow up then. And I know I said last question in the book, but other chronic illnesses, what does that refer to?
Yeah. Well, um, I think I talk a lot about like substance use in the book. I drank my way through chemo. I'm very open about it. It was not a good decision, short and long term. I also talk about like body dysmorphia and the way that you feel about yourself, because that changes significantly through the process as well. You know, like like specific to my case, I went into this like 25 tan and gorgeous. My doctor was like, literally, you're the picture of health. How do you have this cancer? You know, and I came out of it looking like Mitch McConnell at 26. So, you know, that was rough. And I didn't handle that well, you know, like I didn't. It was don't be shy. You can laugh at that. It was a
I
good
haven't
one.
stopped
I'll
laughing
give
since you said
it.
it.
Yeah, but like it was rough, you know, like you look in the mirror and you're like, how do I look like this? How am I 25 and how do I look like this? And it just really puts a really shit perspective on where you are standing. And that's true for your career and it's true for your relationships and it's true for substances that you're maybe using or not using. You know, how you feel and or view hookup culture or whatnot. Like I was definitely doing that in the middle of chemo, which was a terrible idea. Like turns out people still want to fuck Mitch McConnell, so I did pretty well. But you know, it was a rough time, and the chronic illness piece very much kind of covers those components of like, you know, how do you cope and what is the aftermath of that.
I'm glad you actually said cope there because I think the humor helps with that. And
100%.
so that is apparent. And while we have been lighthearted and talked about a lot of serious topics, I do think that there is a uh, benefit to having a sense of humor when it comes to such heavy topics.
You
That
have to.
that said, since you've said Mitch McConnell, it hit me who I think.
Don't say it again. He'll appear somewhere.
No, that's a good point. But he's busy with Ted Lasso. But Jason Sudeikis is, he's a little bit older than 25 now at this point. But that's who, I think that it would be somebody that looks just like you and could play you younger if you got him at 25. I don't think it's just the beard, but it may be just the beard.
I mean, that is just the highest of compliments. I've had a crush on him since the first second I saw him on SNL. I was like, who is this man?
Very handsome.
Very handsome man. I will take that as the highest of compliments. Thank you. And maybe I'll reach out and be like, hi.
There you go. Where can our listeners find you? We'll post everywhere the book is and post where to find you. But where's the one place they should go if they want to connect or learn more?
I am a big user of TikTok and Instagram, and that is just at Edward Miskie.
So we'll be sure to include that in the show notes. Edward, thank you very much for joining us. This has been a blast. I look forward to reading your book. I wish you nothing but the best. And I will be rooting for you on each and every one of your endeavors going forward.
Thank you so much. You too.